Rules. Just think about that word for a moment. You might picture laws, regulations, the official stuff.
It's the legal side.
But then you stop and think, and rules are, well, they're way broader, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's also all those unwritten things, the social norms.
Right. The ethical stuff we try to follow, even just, how things are normally done.
From saying hello to, like, complex international treaties.
Exactly. We're basically swimming in this ocean of rules. Some you see, some you don't.
And what's really fascinating, our source calls this human rules, right? It's not just the legal code.
No.
It's this whole complex web of principles, formal and informal, that guides how we act.
And how we interact.
Yeah. And you see these forces, these rules, even in societies without, like, formal courts or police.
That's amazing, isn't it? It suggests it's fundamental.
It really does.
And look, for you listening, probably busy, you want the core ideas quickly. So this deep dive, think of it as your shortcut.
Yeah, getting straight to the essentials.
Yeah. We're not going to get bogged down in, super dense academic language.
No need for that.
Our mission is pretty straightforward. Explore why we humans create rules, what kinds there are, how they're made, and, well, how they affect us.
Basically getting a solid grasp on this fundamental part of being human.
Right. And stepping back, our source, AI perspectives on the science of human rules, it offers a really interesting angle.
It does.
Okay.
It's this analysis prompted by the challenge of teaching AI about human stuff.
Which is a huge challenge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And one of its core ideas is just this universality you mentioned.
Right. So you might be wondering, is there anything that applies to everyone, everywhere? And the source material says, yeah, rules. They touch everyone across all cultures, all of history.
Because fundamentally, we seem to have this deep need.
For what?
Predictability.
Predictability, yeah, and cooperation. We need things to work and some kind of social order.
So this universality, that's a key takeaway. Absolutely. The anthropological evidence it mentions. Finding rule systems, even without formal laws. That tells you something.
It's not just a modern invention.
Not at all. It seems baked into how human groups organize themselves.
Okay, so rules are everywhere, always have been. But the big question remains, why?
Yeah, the fundamental why.
Why do societies universally come up with this stuff? What's driving it?
Well, that takes us into some really deep philosophical water. Big questions.
Thinkers have wrestled with this for ages.
They have. And a common starting point is that state of nature idea. What if there were no rules at all?
The classic thought experiment. Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau.
Exactly. They all used it.
And they had different takes, but they all landed on needing rules, right? In some form.
Pretty much. Let's unpack their main ideas quickly.
Okay, Hobbes first. He wasn't exactly cheerful about it, was he?
No, not at all. He imagined life without rules as a war of all against all.
Right, the famous quote.
Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. His point was you need a really strong power, an absolute authority almost.
To just stop the chaos.
Yeah, to enforce order, provide basic security. Rules are essential to escape that mess.
Grim, but you see the logic. Okay, Locke. A bit more optimistic.
A bit. Locke thought we have natural rights, even without government, life, liberty, property. But without rules and someone impartial to enforce them, those rights aren't secure. You can't rely on them.
So for Locke, rules and government are there to protect those rights.
Precisely. To create a system of laws that secures what's naturally ours.
And Rousseau, often seen as the idealist.
Right. Rousseau thought we were naturally more peaceful, but society, especially private property, kind of corrupted us.
Okay.
So his idea of the social contract was about creating rules based on the general will.
The collective good.
Yeah, as a way to get back some collective freedom and equality under rules we all agree to.
Interesting. So very different starting points, different ideas about government. But they all saw problems in a ruleless state that pushed towards needing rules in governance.
Exactly. That's the common thread. And this whole discussion naturally leads to a really important distinction.
Which is?
The difference between natural law and positive law. It's about where rules get their authority.
Okay, natural law. That's the idea of these universal moral principles, like built into the universe or reason itself.
Kind of, yeah. Thinkers like Aristotle, Cicero, Aquinas, even Locke again, they pushed this idea.
That things like justice, basic rights, they're not just human inventions.
Right. They argue they're grounded in this underlying natural order. And this natural law acts as a kind of yardstick.
To measure human-made laws against.
Exactly. And Aquinas even said a human law that goes against natural law isn't really law at all. It's a perversion of law.
Wow, strong words. Okay, so if natural law is the universal moral code, what's positive law then?
Positive law is the stuff humans actually create. Laws made by legislatures, courts, agencies.
Society-specific, written-down rules.
Yeah, specific to places and times. And crucially, their authority comes from the legitimacy of the institution that made them.
Not necessarily because they're morally perfect.
Right, that's the core idea of legal positivism. Validity comes from the source, the process.
So there's this tension, isn't there? Does a law have to be good to be valid?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a debate that's raged for centuries and has huge real-world consequences.
You can see why. Think about unjust laws throughout history.
Exactly. It's still a fundamental issue in legal philosophy.
Okay, let's shift slightly. We hear the phrase the rule of law thrown around a lot. What does that actually mean?
It's a really core political ideal. Basically, it means everyone, and this is the critical part, everyone, including the government itself.
It's subject to the law.
Yes, accountable under the law.
Yes.
No one is above it. It's about governing through established public rules, not just arbitrary decisions.
So it's not just having laws, it's about how power is exercised.
Precisely. It's about creating a system where power is constrained, predictable, and impersonal to protect individual liberty. It's fragile, but vital.
Okay, no one above the law, powerful idea. How does that actually work? What are the key parts?
Well, our source lays out a few things. First, accountability officials have to answer for their actions under law.
Makes sense.
Second, the laws themselves need to be just, meaning clear, public, stable, applied evenly, protecting rights.
So the quality of the laws matters.
Definitely. Third, open government transparency in how laws are made and enforced.
Okay.
And finally, accessible and impartial justice. People need fair ways to resolve disputes.
Right, so it's the whole package, the laws, the process, the accountability. Philosophers like Aristotle, Locke, Montesquieu contributed here.
Ahead time. They stress things like generality laws apply to all. Prospectivity apply to the future, not the past. Clarity, stability.
So people can understand them and plan.
Exactly. Procedural fairness and independent judiciary. It all aims to limit state power predictably and protect freedom.
And all this circles back to why we need rules in the first place. It's not abstract. It serves real functions.
Absolutely fundamental functions. Order, predictability societies just can't function without them.
Protecting rights, enabling cooperation.
Right. Setting expectations, providing ways to settle fights peacefully, even underpinning the economy. Think contracts, property.
And the source notes, they reflect and also shape our values.
They do. It's a two-way street.
Thinking back to Hobbes's grim picture, life without rules.
Yeah.
It sounds like he had a point. Without these frameworks, basic human flourishing, safety, trade, knowledge would be really tough.
That's the core argument. And how legitimate we think these rules are, do we follow out of fear, duty, or belief in their fairness? That massively impacts whether people comply willingly.
Okay, got the philosophical why. Now let's dig into the structure. It's not just formal laws, right? There's this whole other layer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Beyond the written laws, there's this huge influential world of social norms.
The unwritten rules.
Exactly. Shared expectations, often unspoken, guiding us in different situations. Think about personal space norms. They vary, they change.
Right. And they're not all the same weight, are they? The source talks about folkways, mores, taboos.
Good categories. Folkways are the everyday customs. Table manners, greetings. Break one, you might just seem rude.
Right, like talking loudly on your phone in a quiet place. Annoying, but not illegal. What about mores?
Mores are more serious. They link to a society's core moral views. Things like honesty, not stealing.
Okay.
Violating mores is seen as a bigger deal, often gets strong disapproval, and many mores get written into actual laws.
So theft is against the mores and against the law.
Yeah.
And taboos, they sound intense.
They are. Taboos are the strongest norms. Things considered deeply offensive, almost sacredly forbidden.
Like incest in most cultures.
Exactly. Breaking a taboo usually triggers extreme disgust, serious social punishment, often legal sanctions too.
So folkways are minor customs, mores are moral rules, taboos are the absolute no-nos, and enforcement differs.
Totally. Folkways. Informal pressure, maybe a look or a comment. Mores and taboos, also informal pressure like gossip or ostracism, but often formal legal consequences too, because they're seen as so vital.
That makes sense. So we have informal social rules and formal laws. How do they relate? Always aligned.
Often, yeah. Formal laws frequently just codify strong mores, but not always. You can have stuff that's legal but still frowned upon socially, or illegal stuff that certain groups tolerate. There can be gaps or conflicts.
Right. Which brings us to HLA Hart's idea about primary and secondary rules in legal systems. Sounds key.
Very influential. Hart said a proper legal system isn't just rules telling you what to do or not do. Those are primary rules.
The basic commands: don't steal, pay taxes.
Exactly. Hart argued you also need secondary rules. Rules about the primary rules.
Rules about rules. Okay, explain that.
He saw three main types.
Yeah.
First, the rule of recognition. This tells you how to identify a valid primary rule in that system.
Like the Constitution says laws passed by Parliament are valid. That's a rule of recognition.
Perfect example. It solves the problem of uncertainty, which rules actually count.
Okay, what's next?
Rules of change. These give power to people or bodies to make new rules, change old ones, get rid of them.
Like how legislatures work or how we make contracts.
Exactly. They stop the system from being static, unable to adapt.
Keeps things moving. And the third type?
Rules of adjudication. These give authority to institutions, like courts, to decide if a primary rule was broken and what the consequence is.
So how disputes get settled and rules enforced.
Right. It tackles the inefficiency of just having rules without a clear process for applying them.
Okay, so primary rules are the what, secondary rules are the how we identify, change, and enforce the what. That helps. And all this operates within a culture, right? That must matter hugely.
Oh, profoundly. Culture shapes interpretation, enforcement, everything. Think about, say, individualistic versus collectivistic cultures.
Right, like Hofstede's work. Individualistic is more me, collectivistic more we.
Broadly, yes. Individualistic cultures often focus on personal autonomy, individual rights. Collectivistic ones tend to prioritize group harmony, loyalty, interdependence.
And how does that affect rules?
Well, in more individualistic places, rules might emphasize freedoms, maybe compliance is more about rational choice or personal duty. Deviating might be more accepted if rights aren't harmed.
Okay.
In collectivistic cultures, rules often aim to keep social harmony, respect hierarchy. Conforming is really valued. Actions that disrupt the group get a stronger negative reaction.
And then there's uncertainty avoidance, how much a culture likes clear rules versus ambiguity.
Right. High uncertainty avoidance cultures want clear, formal rules. Less ambiguity, more predictability. Lower uncertainty avoidance cultures are okay with more flexibility, less structure.
This all points towards rules not being objective things just out there. They're socially constructed.
That's a really important concept, yes. Social constructionism says that a lot of our reality, including rules, is created and kept alive through social interaction and shared agreement.
We invent them, we don't discover them.
Essentially, yes. And they get so ingrained through socialization, how we learn our culture's norms, that they feel natural, inevitable.
So things like crime or gender roles. They're not fixed. They're shaped by social agreements over time. And language is key.
Language is huge. How we talk about rules shapes how we understand them, helps constitute that social reality. And it means rules aren't static. They change as understandings and power shift.
That idea of social construction really hits home. We're not dealing with pure logic here. It's messy, human, cultural.
Absolutely. Which is why teaching, say, an AI about human rules is so incredibly hard, capturing all that nuance. Wow.
Okay, so we know why rules exist. They're different forms. How do they actually get made? Who are the rule makers?
It's a mixed bag, really. Governments, obviously, legislatures pass laws, executives issue orders, courts make precedents.
With formal stuff.
Right. But also institutions, businesses, schools, religious bodies, they all have their own rules.
And then the informal norms we talked about.
Yeah, they often just emerge organically within communities or groups. No formal process.
And experts play a role too, shaping regulations.
Definitely. In complex areas, expert knowledge shapes rules and policies. And now, potentially, AI assisting or even generating rules, that raises huge questions about authority.
So it's not just top-down government, lots of players. And power must influence this, right? Whose rules get made?
Hugely influential. Conflict theories, for instance, see society as competition between unequal groups.
So rules might benefit the dominant groups.
That's the argument. Rules can be tools to maintain advantage and control. Think about interest groups lobbying.
trying to shape laws in their favor.
Exactly. Their success often depends on resources, organization. It's not always a level playing field.
Now, for rules to stick, people need to accept them as legitimate, right? Max Weber talked about this.
Yes. His famous types of authority, explaining why people obey. There's traditional authority.
That's not a custom, like a king inheriting the throne.
Right. It's always been this way. And charismatic authority.
Based on the leader's amazing personality, a revolutionary figure.
Exactly. Someone inspiring intense loyalty.
And the third, rational legal authority. That sounds like modern democracies.
It is. Legitimacy comes from belief in the legality of the rules themselves and the authority of the office, not the person.
We obey the law, the position, because we accept the system.
Precisely. Modern states rely heavily on this: procedures, constitutions, fairness.
So it's not just who makes rules, but how they're made, and if that process feels legitimate, what are the different processes?
Well, you have formal legislation, deliberate, structured steps, like a bill becoming law.
Right.
Administrative agencies also have formal processes for making regulations public notice, comment periods.
The official routes. What about informal emergence?
That's more bottom-up. Social norms developing organically through interaction, shared expectations converging, no single designer.
So whether formal or informal, rule creation is political, reflects power, always ask who benefits.
Absolutely. Cui bono. And how might rules create or sustain inequality? Critical questions.
Especially as we think about AI potentially getting involved. I need to watch those biases.
Definitely.
Okay, origins, structure, creation, covered. Now let's zoom in on the individual. Why do we follow rules? What's going on inside our heads?
The psychology of compliance.
Yeah.
It's complex. One big factor is obedience to authority.
Milgram's experiments.
Exactly. Showed how strongly people defer to perceived legitimate authority, sometimes even against their own conscience.
Yeah, those were shocking. Just someone seeming official was enough. Highlights that authority bias.
It really does. Then there's conformity, the social pressure angle.
Wanting to fit in.
Yeah, desire to belong, avoid disapproval. We adjust our behavior to match the group. Different from obedience, its peers, not necessarily authority figures.
So following orders versus following the crowd, is there a deeper level?
Yes, internalization. That's when you truly accept the rule, make it part of your own values, your identity.
So you follow it because you believe it's right, not just external pressure.
Exactly, even if no one's watching. That's the deepest level.
And moral development theories, like Kohlberg's stages.
They track how our reasons for following rules evolve. From avoiding punishment to seeking approval, maybe eventually to abstract ethical principles.
And there's a rational side, too. Cost-benefit.
Sure. Rational choice theory. We weigh the costs getting caught, disapproval against the benefits, safety, smooth interactions, rewards.
So a mix of motivations: fear, social pressure, personal belief, rational calculation. Okay, what about when we don't follow rules? Why do people break them?
Theories of deviance try to explain that. Strain theory, for instance.
Merton's idea.
Yeah. Suggests deviance comes from a gap between society's goals, like wealth, and the legitimate ways people have to achieve them. Creates strain, leads to rule-breaking adaptations.
Like finding illegitimate ways to get rich, enemy.
Right. Then there's social learning theory.
Learning to be deviant.
Basically, yeah. Learned through interaction, the techniques, the motives, the justifications for people around you.
Makes sense if you're surrounded by it. What about neutralization theory?
That's about the rationalizations people use before breaking a rule to neutralize guilt.
Like what?
It wasn't my fault, no one got hurt, they had it coming. My friends needed me. Excuses, basically.
The mental gymnastics and labeling theory. That focuses on society's reaction.
Exactly. It argues deviance isn't just the act, but how society labels it. Someone does something minor, primary deviance, gets labeled deviant.
That label sticks.
Yeah, creates stigma, exclusion, might limit opportunities. Then the person might internalize the label and act out more. Secondary deviance.
So the label itself can push someone further down that path.
Wow. And breaking rules must have internal effects too, psychologically.
Oh yeah. Cognitive dissonance, that discomfort when your actions clash with your beliefs. Like valuing honesty but lying.
You try to reduce the discomfort.
Right. Change behavior, change belief, or rationalize. And then there's guilt and shame.
Powerful emotions. Guilt more about the act, shame about yourself.
Generally, yes. Guilt might motivate repair. Shame can lead to withdrawal or defensiveness. And sometimes rule breakers feel anger or resentment if the rule seems unfair.
Definitely. Resentment often tied to perceived injustice, violated rights, and all these individual feelings feed back into how society responds formally and informally.
It's this really complex loop between individual minds and social reactions.
It is. And understanding that is key for making effective rules. And thinking about AI's role, punishment isn't the whole story.
Not at all. Okay, theory and psychology down. Let's look at rules in action in different contexts. Real-world stuff.
Right. Well, government is the obvious one. Formal rules, constitutions, laws, regulations.
Yeah.
Formal enforcement, police, courts. All about order, rights, state power.
Okay, then closer to home, families.
Absolutely. Families have rules, spoken and unspoken. Chores, curfews, how you talk to each other, values. Enforcement is informal parental authority, rewards, consequences, love.
Very different feel. And then society, the community level.
That's where social norms, customs, etiquette really operate. How to behave in public, interact, maintain group identity. Enforcement. Social pressure, approval, reputation.
So enforcement mechanisms really vary. What about belief systems? Religion seems like a big source of rules.
Hugely important for many. Religions often provide moral codes, ritual rules, dietary laws, sometimes whole legal systems like halakha or sharia.
Derived from sacred texts' divine authority.
Believed to be, yes, they govern many aspects of life. Enforced by belief, community pressure, sometimes even state law where they overlap or intertwine.
And secular ideologies, liberalism, conservatism.
They also generate rules and principles consistent with their core beliefs about society, government, rights. And secularism itself, separating church and state, shapes legal rules about religious freedom.
On the darker side, what about indoctrination, like brainwashed rules?
Yeah, that's about instilling beliefs and rules, bypassing critical thought, using isolation, repetition, pressure, often associated with cults or totalitarian regimes.
Sounds like coercion, not agreement.
It can be, though milder forms exist in everyday socialization, too. Brainwashing itself is a loaded term, but the idea of instilling unquestioning acceptance is relevant.
Okay, broadening out again. Animals!
Do they have rules?
Well, animal behavior follows patterns, definitely. Instinctual ones, learned ones. Many social animals have dominance hierarchies.
Pecking orders.
Right. They regulate access to resources, reduce conflict. You could see that as a kind of rule system. Enforced by aggression, submission signals. Even communication follows patterns, rules.
So there's order. But is it the same as human rules? We have language, abstract thought.
That's the key difference. Animal order is often instinct, hierarchy. Human rules involve language, concepts like justice, conscious deliberation, huge cultural variation. Human rules are normative ought. Animal behavior is descriptive.
But both manage conflict and create predictability.
Yes, that's a
Wow.
shared function. Fascinating comparison. What about abstract systems? Science, math?
Do they have rules?
Absolutely. Scientific laws describe natural regularities, how nature behaves. Math and logic use rules based on axioms, definitions, inference, how abstract systems work. But different from social rules, right? Science describes is, math describes if-then in abstract worlds. Social rules prescribe should.
Exactly. Scientific laws are descriptive. Mathologic rules are definitional, deductive. Their enforcement is consistency, validation, not social punishment. Human rules are prescriptive, involve values, social consequences.
So rule means different things in different contexts.
Yeah.
And human rules are context-dependent, fluid.
Very much so. Meaning depends on social, cultural, historical context. And our understanding evolves with experience. A novice follows rules rigidly. An expert is more intuitive.
And emergencies. Rules can change.
Sometimes suspended or modified, yeah.
Yeah.
Emergency powers. Crises often lead to new rules, too. And rules can be ambiguous, have loopholes.
Creating interpretation problems.
Right. Navigating ambiguity needs understanding of the rule's purpose, its underlying values. It's rarely just black and white.
Wow. So rules stretch from family dinner tables to the laws of physics, in a way. But human social rules are uniquely complex and contextual.
And uniquely challenging to get right, or to teach to something non-human.
Okay, we've seen what rules are, how they work. Now the crunch question. How do we judge them? Are they good rules, bad rules? What's the ethical dimension?
Yeah. Evaluating rules throws us right into ethics. Key things are fairness, impartiality, consistency, equity. Is the rule fair in itself and how it's applied? Perceived fairness is huge for legitimacy.
Makes sense. What else?
Protecting rights, fundamental human rights like life, liberty, expression, and upholding dignity, respecting people's autonomy and worth, avoiding arbitrary or demeaning rules.
Fairness, rights, dignity. Seems like a good baseline. How do we apply those? Are there frameworks?
Different ethical theories offer lenses. Utilitarianism looks at consequences. Does the rule produce the greatest good for the greatest number?
Maximizing happiness.
Right. Deontology focuses on duties. Principles is the rule consistent with moral obligations regardless of outcome. Kant's ideas fit here.
Following the right principles.
And virtue ethics looks at character. Does the rule help cultivate virtues like honesty, justice, compassion, leading to human flourishing?
So consequences, duties, or character. Different ways to judge. What about justice specifically?
Justice is often the goal. We talk about different types. Distributive justice. Fair allocation of resources, opportunities.
Like taxes, welfare, anti-discrimination laws.
Procedural justice.
Yeah.
Fairness of the process, how decisions are made, rules applied. Is there voice, neutrality, respect?
You mentioned this earlier process. Fairness really impacts acceptance.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Then retributive justice. Fairness of punishment. Proportionality, just deserts.
Criminal law territory.
And restorative justice. Focuses on repairing harm, healing victims, offender accountability, community restoration, dialogue mediation.
So multiple angles on justice too. Given all these frameworks and ideas, it's no wonder we disagree about rules sometimes.
Oh, constantly. Rules are debated because people have different values, interests, interpretations of fairness, different ethical starting points, utility versus rights, for example.
And power dynamics play in. Challenging unfair rules.
Absolutely. Social construction and power fuel these contests. Resolving deep moral disagreements about rules is a constant challenge.
And rules affect our state of mind, don't they? Our well-being.
Profoundly. Clear, fair rules offer security, predictability, reduce anxiety.
But the bad rules.
Unfair, arbitrary, confusing, overly restrictive rules that cause stress, alienation, erode trust. Pressure to conform to conflicting norms is tough. Procedural injustice feels deeply wrong.
So evaluating rules isn't just abstract. It's about their impact on fairness, rights, dignity, and ultimately human well-being.
It's a complex, vital task. Not a one-time thing, but an ongoing process of reflection and adjustment.
Which leads us nicely into thinking about how rules evolve and what the future might hold.
Right. Historically, rule systems are always changing. Some theories even link our capacity for rules to gene-culture coevolution.
Are biology and culture evolving together around rule following?
Possibly, yeah. And clearly, as societies change technologically, economically, politically, rules adapt. Laws change, norms shift. Think about huge historical changes.
Demonstrates their dynamic nature.
Exactly. Which leads to ideas like adaptive governance.
Meaning?
Rule systems that are flexible, learn from experience, adjust based on feedback. Not just set it and forget it. Crucial for complex problems.
And we have plenty of those now. Globalization.
Big challenge. Nation-state laws struggle with global issues. International enforcement is often weak. Conflicts between legal traditions. Plus, rising nationalism pushes back against global rules. Huge driver of change. Digital tech, AI, creates new areas needing rules, privacy, cybersecurity, AI ethics, autonomous systems. Laws lag behind innovation. Tech also changes enforcement and rulemaking itself.
And climate change.
Massive global collective action problem. Demands international rules for mitigation, adaptation. But national interests, economics, equity issues make it incredibly hard. Needs that adaptive approach.
And then there's the AI revolution specifically. Huge potential impact on rules.
Both as a tool and as something needing regulation. AI in governance and law.
Automating legal research, drafting contracts, maybe predicting outcomes.
Yeah, potential for speed, efficiency, consistency, access to justice, data-driven insights.
But the ethical worries are significant. Bias, transparency, accountability.
Major concerns. AI trained on biased data can perpetuate discrimination. The black box problem makes it hard to know why an AI decided something, hindering accountability. Privacy, security, misuse risks too.
So we need AI governance frameworks.
Urgently, focusing on fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy, security, bias audits, explainable AI, secure data handling, clear lines of responsibility.
Could AI actually create better rules? Analyze data, suggest improvements?
Potentially. AI could model impacts, suggest more effective or equitable rules based on given metrics, but
who defines better?
Exactly. That involves value judgments AI can't make autonomously, plus risks of hidden biases, unintended consequences. AI needs human oversight, validation, democratic legitimacy.
So AI as an assistant, not a replacement for the human side of deciding values and making laws.
That seems to be the consensus. It can help analyze and implement, but the core normative and political work remains human.
So looking ahead, it's about integrating AI thoughtfully. Human-centered AI governance.
That's the goal. leveraging the benefits while fiercely protecting fairness, transparency, accountability, human dignity, making sure tech serves, not subverts, our values and the rule of law.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive. Rules. We've seen they're incredibly complex, absolutely fundamental.
From formal laws to subtle norms.
Shaped by philosophy, society, psychology, culture. They give us order, protect rights, enable cooperation, reflect values.
And we constantly need to work on making them better, more effective, more legitimate, more just. Through adaptation, participation, focus on fairness.
And AI throws a massive new element into the mix. Huge potential, but critical need for governance that keeps humans and human values central.
Prioritizing fairness, transparency, accountability, dignity, while harnessing the good AI can do.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, listening in. As AI gets woven deeper into our lives, maybe even into how we're governed, how do we ensure our rules don't just keep order, but genuinely reflect and promote our deepest human values in all situations?
What does it really mean for a machine, an AI, to truly grasp the incredibly rich, complex, evolving reality of human rules?
Definitely something worth thinking about.
This is DigitView.